rights do parents have in public schools? What rights do community members have in determining what our public schools look like? What does it really mean that a public school is, quote, a community resource? Hi, I'm Chuck. I'm an educator with a new job, a new commute. You're on the drive with me here. This is Drive Time Diaries, and parents' rights is on my mind today. Singular mind. On my mind today. I'm of one sound mind. Anyway, I saw a headline yesterday that someone shared on Instagram, a screenshot of it, I think. It was RevWoo Truth. Was the account I think I saw it from. And the headline that was shared said that somewhere back east, I think it was Pennsylvania, a federal judge ruled that parents couldn't opt their kids out of, quote, LGBTQ plus lessons. Which then hits on the topic of banning books, and that fight that libraries have had the last couple of years, school libraries, public libraries, about the role of books with, on some levels, it's even just books with transgender characters in them, or transgender narratives, and then in some other ways, it's books that are more explicit in how kids are exploring their sexuality, that kind of thing. But the question is, when parents, when we send our kids to public schools, how much of our rights as parents are we abdicating? And what is the point of school even? Why are we sending our kids there? Which narrative is true? One narrative of at least the history of schools, the way they're set up, is that John Dewey and a bunch of other industrial magnates in the late 19th century put together this school system to standardize factory workers. And that's why we have bells, and that's why we all march around like we have little jobs when we're in school. And we go from place to place, and we have a manager, and that person is called our teacher when we are in school still. And that narrative says that all these things that we do at school is a public good in the sense that we want a base level of education for our workforce so that we can have awesome factories that produce awesome American-made stuff. I think there's another narrative that is separate from that parents send our kids to public schools as a public good to help kids become whatever they want to be and then benefit the society in that way. And that public schools are a public good because they equalize opportunity so that we can have equal outcomes. I think that's more of the equity narrative. School is there to equalize access to learning in ways that if we all had to privately pay for education, or we all had to homeschool our kids or whatever, that different kids would have different opportunities. And so I do think, what's the role in parents? What is the role of parents in schools, or in school systems, school districts, in individual classrooms? What is their role? I think a little bit of that has to do with, what do you believe about education, public education specifically? So let me just insert here then, if you don't know me personally or haven't listened to an episode where I've talked about this yet. My wife and I, we homeschool our kids. She actually does it. She has 4 homeschool students. And every year, beginning of the year, I never have to worry about who my kid's teacher is going to be. I know that their teacher is going to be exceptionally gifted. I know that she is going to be exceptionally prepared. I know that she is going to keep me in the loop about what they're learning. I know that every day they are going to feel loved, and they will be cared for, and they will be learning within a worldview and a framework that we support. When you send your kids to traditional school, whether it's public or private school, you don't always know that. It's a little bit of a roll of the dice. And you just have to hope. As a student, you just have to hope that you're going to gel with your teacher that year. As the parent, you just have to hope that the school board and school administration has hired and put teachers in place that you can trust. And it's a social contract. Hey, I need you to educate my kid or babysit them for free for the day while I go to work, because I do not have the resources or know-how or will to teach them at home, any of those things. And P.S. I need you to make sure they turn out well. So like, I think the way that social contract is defined is different. Different schools, different people, different administrators, different school boards all look at that a little bit differently. Some of those see that as, hey, you gave us our kid, now we're professionals, let us do our work. And other schools see that as, hey, we have your kids, now come be involved and help us out. But if we have a disagreement, we're professionals, get out of the way and let us do our job. And that's where I think a lot of the pushback from the right is coming from, where they spent all of the pandemic with their kids during lockdowns and whatnot, and saw a little bit deeper into the experience their kids were having in school, and maybe they still believe in public education, so they're still sending their kids to school, or that is the option that they have to take for whatever reason. So their kids are in public schools, but parents were asked to do a heavy lift during the pandemic too. Teachers were pandemic teaching over Zoom. That was incredibly difficult. And, also parents were pandemic parenting. Teachers that are parents were pandemic teaching and pandemic parenting at the same time. And so parents were given some more power and responsibility. Hey, make sure your kid gets on Zoom. Make sure your kid is doing their homework. Make sure your kid isn't falling asleep while they're on Zoom. Those kinds of things. I think schools gave and asked a little bit more of parents during that time because they were with their kids in a lot of ways, and parents aren't ready to give that back up. And so that's where we see parents wanting more of a say in what goes on in their kids' classroom. And as a person who is a homeschool family and knows that is deeply valuable to my kids, I have a hard time being against parent rights. I know that I'm of the conviction that if everyone could at least in some form, for a little bit of the day or a little bit of their kids' life. Homeschool their kid, I think that is very, very valuable experience that requires someone to want to do it in the home, that requires the resources to do it. I mean, aside from super ridiculous, really expensive private schools, I think that homeschooling your kids is at least as expensive as tuition, in the way that homeschool, I mean, you're buying all the stuff. You're not paying the teacher, but you're paying for all the books when you homeschool. And if you get to reuse it because you have multiple kids, then it gets a little more economy of scale. But it's not the cheap option to homeschool by any means. So it is not possible for everyone to homeschool their kid, but I think that it's really very valuable because you then, as the parent, get to be in charge of your kid's education. But I think I am of the conviction and mindset also that as public institutions, our bosses are the community. This is a democracy viewpoint to look at this also. Who is everybody's boss? Sure, the teacher's boss is the principal. The principal's boss is an assistant superintendent or the superintendent. The superintendent's boss is the school board. Who is the school board's boss? I don't think there's a school board where those people aren't elected school board members. And so then the school board member's boss is the community. And so then to say that, and we even had this charade in school board meetings where we have parent open comment, where it at least looks like that we want to care what the community has to say. Whether or not we actually do, it gets really contentious sometimes, those school board meetings, when people are really fired up about issues, or staff members. But there's a system in place here where the community is the bosses of their public schools. And so what rights do parents have in there? I think that's up to the community to work that out. But they definitely have a say in public schools as community members and as people that are entrusting these professionals with their children and their education. Yes, we educators have gone to school. We have multiple degrees. I have a degree. I have a master's and a half, essentially, because the master's I got, and then I have a gifted certification, which required about half of a degree. And I'm going back to get a specialist degree here starting in October. So many degrees, and I feel under-degreed in my new school here. And so we are the experts on instructional strategies and how to teach a ton of kids at once and how to make the best environment we can when we don't totally know the kids because they're not our own kids, and we're trying to individualize as best as we can, even though there's, even in a really good situation, 13 kids in the classroom that we're trying to teach all at once. So educators are the experts in that. In that setting, how do we get kids nurtured and encouraged, and how do we get these kids seen and feeling cared for? But parents are still the experts in their kid, and that is, you want to talk about unalienable rights. I think that's a parent unalienable right to have a say in what happens to their kid. And just because it's a public school doesn't mean that we have gates that we put up that prevent them from having a voice into our schools. So that's a parent's right in my case. I am now in the parking lot. This drive is over. But I'd love to hear what you have to say about this episode. What do you think about parents' rights in schools? You can shoot me on Twitter, Chuck C. Baker. You can get me on Instagram, Mr. C. Baker for math or Drive Time Diary. And you can just send me a text if you know me, or you can talk to me in person, or you can send a response if you're listening here on Spotify. All right, till next time, we'll see you later on the next drive.